What if money suddenly disappeared forever? Imagine waking up one seemingly ordinary morning, expecting the familiar glow of your phone screen, the usual cascade of notifications, the comforting numbers in your banking app that quietly whisper, "Everything is under control." You reach for the phone on autopilot, still half asleep, ready to swipe, scroll, check your balance, approve a couple of payments, and move on with your day. But this morning something feels wrong in a way you cannot immediately explain. The banking app refuses to load. You assume it is just the internet, so you refresh the page, restart the phone, switch to mobile data, switch back to Wi-Fi, try another app. Nothing works. Every service connected to money looks broken. No balances, no recent transactions, no card details, just empty screens and strange error messages. At first you think it is a temporary glitch. Maybe the servers are down, maybe it is a regional outage. Maybe some major provider is having a bad day. You are annoyed, but not frightened. You can live a few hours without payments, you tell yourself. Social media fills up with screenshots and jokes. People make memes about the day money took a break. Comment sections explode with theories, but most of them end with the same phrase, "They will fix it soon." The key word is they, some invisible group of experts who always stand between us and real chaos. But very quickly it becomes clear that there is no they this time. The problem is not a bank, not a single country, not even a specific network. It is everywhere at once. ATMs across the world stop working. Point-of-sale terminals in supermarkets freeze mid-transaction. Online stores display endless loading icons. Cryptocurrencies vanish from wallets as if they had never been mined. Cash loses its status as well, because no system remains that recognizes it as a claim on anything. Overnight, money in all its forms simply stops existing as a functioning idea. That is the moment when disbelief begins to turn into fear. People rush to nearby shops to buy something quickly, just in case, but discover that buying is no longer a thing. The shelves are still full, the lights are still on, the staff is still standing behind the counters, and yet the entire mechanism that once moved goods from shelves into your hands has disappeared. "Can I just pay later?" someone asks. "Can I transfer when the system comes back? Can you just trust me?" The cashier does not know what to say. She does not know whether she still has a job. The manager does not know whether the products still belong to the company. No one knows whether companies even exist without money. In a few hours, the world accidentally runs one of the largest social experiments in history. What happens when you remove the abstraction that connects billions of strangers? For years we were told that civilization is built on infrastructure, laws, technology, and power. Now we discover that it was actually built on shared belief in a story. Money was not metal, paper, or lines of code. It was a collective agreement that certain symbols could stand in for value, effort, time, trust, and future promises. The moment that agreement vanishes, our institutions lose the language they use to talk to each other. Gas stations no longer know who is allowed to take fuel. Logistics companies cannot calculate the cost of moving goods, so they cancel routes rather than burn precious resources for free. Airlines ground their fleets. Cargo ships stop in ports without orders. Warehouses are stuck with mountains of food, medicine, clothing, and electronics that cannot officially be sold, because there is no unit in which to measure the exchange. In some districts, people live a few hundred meters away from huge stockpiles they are not allowed to touch. In other districts, shelves are already empty. The infamous phrase "out of stock" suddenly loses meaning, because technically everything is in stock and simultaneously unreachable. Governments hold emergency meetings. Heads of state appear on television speaking in careful, reassuring tones. They promise that order will be restored, that experts are working on a solution, that people should stay calm and avoid panic. But every sentence they pronounce hides the same unspoken problem. No one knows what to replace money with. You cannot simply invent a new currency overnight, because a currency is not just a symbol. It is a network of trust, institutions, habits, legal systems, and expectations. All of that was tied to the old system, and the old system is gone. Some countries try to introduce temporary ration cards for food, water, and fuel. Others attempt to create systems of essential work credits, promising that people who help maintain critical infrastructure today will be rewarded later, when a new order is established. But later is an abstract promise in a world that has just watched its biggest abstract promise collapse. Police officers are told to keep the peace, yet their own families are standing in the same lines as everyone else. Doctors want to heal patients, but they cannot guarantee new supplies of medicine once current stocks run out. Soldiers are given orders to protect warehouses, but not all of them agree that protecting goods for an unknown future owner is more important than giving those goods to hungry civilians right now. Over the next days, the pressure inside large cities grows. Supermarkets that remain open are quickly stripped of everything easy to carry. Pharmacies are overwhelmed by desperate people who want to stockpile painkillers, antibiotics, and basic medical supplies, just in case. Public transport begins to fail as drivers and maintenance staff stop showing up regularly. They are not on strike in the old sense of the word. They simply have no clear reason to continue working the same way they did before. Landlords cannot demand rent. Utility companies cannot send bills. Digital subscription services are instantly meaningless. Entire categories of business vanish in a matter of hours. Not because buildings have burned down, but because their business models rested on a unit of value that no longer exists. As chaos spreads, a quiet but decisive migration begins. People who have relatives in rural areas start calling them, asking if they can come and stay for a while until everything settles down. It does not settle down. It transforms. Highways fill with cars loaded not with luxury goods, but with blankets, tools, canned food, and whatever else seems useful in a world that suddenly feels less like a marketplace and more like a survival scenario. Trains, where they still move, are packed with passengers heading away from financial centers and toward land, water, and soil. Outside the cities, the rules of the new game become obvious much faster. The most valuable resource is no longer the number on your account. It is your direct ability to produce or secure what you need. Farmers who once struggled to negotiate prices with wholesalers now find themselves at the center of local networks. People who know how to grow food, repair machinery, build shelters, filter water, or provide medical care become the pillars of emerging communities. Former office workers, marketers, and financial analysts face a brutal learning curve. Their skills are not useless, but they are several steps away from immediate survival, and survival is now the main priority. The world is transformed, and humanity must adapt to a new reality, where true value is found not in abstract symbols, but in tangible skills and community. Barter reappears, not as a nostalgic experiment, but as a necessary system. Food becomes a universal medium of exchange. A sack of potatoes might pay for a repaired roof. A few liters of fuel might cover hours of manual labor. A pair of sturdy boots can be traded for blankets, tools, or medicine. Certain items quickly evolve into proto-currencies: batteries, matches, antiseptics, seeds, fuel, candles, water filters. They are durable, divisible, and always in demand. In small towns and villages, improvised markets pop up where people bring whatever they have and leave with whatever they can negotiate for. Meanwhile, in places where cooperation fails, force steps in. Some groups try to seize warehouses, fuel depots, or farms by intimidation or violence. Without clear legal systems, justice becomes local, personal, and inconsistent. One community might choose democratic councils and collective decision-making. Another might fall under the control of a charismatic and ruthless leader who promises safety in exchange for absolute loyalty. The map of the world begins to look less like a collection of nations and more like a mosaic of micro-societies, each with its own rules, values, and level of stability. In all this confusion, a deeper realization slowly sinks in. Money was not the enemy. It was a flawed, sometimes unfair, often abused tool. But it was also the mechanism that made large-scale cooperation possible. It allowed you to trust a stranger enough to buy bread from them. It allowed companies on opposite sides of the planet to coordinate the production of complex technology. It turned millions of individual efforts into something like a synchronized dance. Without it, that dance breaks apart into a series of isolated, clumsy movements. Some people begin to ask an uncomfortable question. If money is gone and the world feels more dangerous, was the dream of a moneyless utopia ever realistic? The old argument claimed that without money there would be no greed, no extreme inequality, no exploitation. But the new reality shows that the desire to dominate, to accumulate, to control rare resources does not vanish with paper bills. The person who once hoarded digits in a bank account might now hoard cans of food, weapons, or loyal followers. The stage is different, but the script is disturbingly familiar. After a month, humanity is still standing. but the shape of civilization has radically changed. Life is slower, harder, and more physical. Every day is filled with tasks our ancestors would recognize immediately: gather, build, repair, protect, share. And yet inside these tasks, something new tries to grow. Small communities experiment with alternative value systems. Some create reputation scores that are not stored in an app, but in collective memory. People who help others consistently are given more influence in decisions. Others formalize time-based exchange, where 1 hour of work is traded for 1 hour of another person's help. None of these systems are perfect, but they reveal a crucial insight. Value does not disappear when money disappears. It simply becomes visible again in human relationships. The final question is not, could we survive without money? Because clearly we could, at a certain population level and with enough adaptation. The real question is, do we like the world that emerges when money disappears suddenly and completely? A world without money can feel honest in a brutal way, because every exchange is direct and transparent. But it can also feel merciless, because there is no buffer, no abstraction to soften the impact of mistakes or misfortune. Every failure is immediate. Every conflict is personal. Every act of generosity or selfishness is magnified. If humanity ever chooses to abandon money on purpose rather than lose it by accident, it will have to do more than delete banking apps. It will have to build a culture where trust, cooperation, and shared responsibility are not inspirational slogans, but daily practice. It will need education systems that teach people how to collaborate, not just compete. It will need local structures that can function, even if global networks fail. Only then could a world without money feel like progress rather than collapse. Until that day, money with all its imperfections remains the fragile glue that holds billions of strangers together. If it vanished forever today, the world would not end. But it would become a mirror in which we would see ourselves without decoration. And what we saw in that mirror might shock us far more than the disappearance of money itself. Yet there is one more layer to this scenario that most people would only notice after the first shock, after the first wave of fear, after the first month of sheer survival. When the constant background noise of prices, discounts, salaries, interest rates, and financial news disappears, something else begins to surface: the question of meaning. For years, many people measured their success through numbers on screens, through zeros added to balances, through things they could afford to buy but did not really need. Without those numbers, the old definition of doing well becomes useless. Some individuals would experience this as a kind of freedom. There is no point in staying at a job you always hated if there is no paycheck on the way. There is no reason to chase promotions, overtime, and bonuses in a system that no longer exists. You can walk away without the usual fear of losing everything, because that everything has already disappeared. In this strange sense, the greatest financial collapse in history also becomes the greatest resignation in history. People step back and ask themselves, often for the first time, what they actually want to contribute when survival is secured. Others, however, would feel a deep void. If your entire identity was built around accumulation, around being richer, faster, more efficient, more productive than everyone else, a world without money leaves you without a scoreboard. You may still try to dominate in other ways, but the clarity of numerical victory is gone. The comfort of comparing yourself to others through a single metric is gone. Some would respond by clinging to control over physical resources. Others might break, realizing that they have no internal compass beyond the pursuit of more. In the end, a world without money forces humanity to confront the one thing it kept trying to outsource to numbers: responsibility. When no currency can be blamed and no price tag can justify harm, people are left alone with their decisions. That is terrifying. That is beautiful. And maybe that is the most shocking truth of all. Money did not just buy us things. It also bought us excuses. Without it, we might finally have to decide who we are, not just what we can afford. If this video made you think, consider subscribing. There's much more to explore.